There was a certain amount of dissension last time, both during the class and afterwards, in how I was explaining Russell's main point. So what I want to do today is spend most of the time explaining Russell's main point with sufficient force and clarity to crush any dissent. And you guys' task is to nonetheless think of an objection. Okay, so Russell's main point, I think, is that there's a basic class of names that is getting tied up to objects, but not by being defined in terms of descriptions. And if that's right, it's a really basic objection to anything like Frege or Sell's approaches. So if there's a basic class of names that are getting hooked up to objects, but the thing is not being done by way of descriptions, then how is it being done? Well, Russell's term for that relation is acquaintance, and he means here a kind of non-propositional knowledge. That's to say, when you encounter an object in ordinary vision, or a property in ordinary vision, say, then you get some knowledge of it just from the sensory encounter, just by having that connect with the thing, just by coming into your field of view, you get some kind of knowledge of it. And that's more basic than being able to describe it. That's not a matter of being able to describe it at all. He gives some for the example of colour, that when you encounter the colour red, you know from experience perfectly and completely what red is. It's not that you can say red is thus and so. It's not a matter of being able to say propositionally that red is thus and so. It's a matter of knowing what it is in some more basic way. So the problem with this kind of view of Russell's, on which you put the sign and the reference, and nothing like Frege's sense or Sell's cluster of descriptions, is that there were two problems. One was the problem of informativeness. You can have different signs referring to the same thing, and the identity between them can be informative. And how do you explain that possibility if it's not that names are getting hooked up to descriptions? And the other was the possibility of meaning without reference, because it looks like a sign can have meaning without reference. So what is going on there? How could it be that signs have meaning without reference? If they're defined in terms of descriptions, you can make sense of a description that has meaning but doesn't designate anything. But how could a sign working like this, where there's just the name and the object, how could that have meaning? These are the two key problems he's going to face. So let me just go over his main points here. There's a general contrast between what you might call how many terms and names. So anyone who's done logic, the contrast is between quantifiers and names. The terms that are telling you how many objects a particular predicate is true of versus names that are telling you which things the predicate is true of. So here's a predicate, wrote Waverley. One thing you can do is say how many people wrote Waverley. Another thing you can do is put in a name there of someone who wrote Waverley. So if you say someone wrote Waverley, that gives you a sentence, all right. No one wrote Waverley. Many people wrote Waverley. They all give you sentences. Are any of these terms names? No, these terms are not names. They are how many expressions, right? They tell you how many things wrote Waverley. That's all right. What could be plainer than that? Follow me very closely here. All kinds of radical conclusions will emerge. So if you see a step that doesn't sound right, you better protest. That's all right. These are not names. These are quantifiers or how many terms. Okay. So the optical illusion is when you say the author of Waverley, what that phrase "the author of Waverley" is a complex how many term. It is not a name. So the first point you just gave me is there's a big contrast between these how many terms and names. Russell's point is this term, the author of Waverley, is not a name. It is a how many term. There is an optical illusion that makes it look like a referring term, but it is not a referring term. And a simple way to see here's one way of seeing the force of Russell's point that it's not a referring term. Suppose you think very slowly. I know that for you guys this is not easy to imagine, but suppose that you think very slowly. And furthermore, suppose that 200 years from now, there are all kinds of novels around. Some of them are generated entirely by machines. Some of them are written by committees. Some of them are written by a mixture of committee and machine. Sometimes you get a novel written by just one person. Sometimes you get a novel written by a bunch of people and some machines. But there's also stylometric analyses that you can do of the novels that are written. So given a novel, you can run tests on it to say, were any humans involved in the generation of this novel? Or was this novel written by one person or by many? That's all right, you can do that. Right? So suppose you're looking at a particular novel, or suppose also you could find out the nationality of the author of a novel by running the right kind of tests of what vocabulary is used, what kind of sentence constructions are used. Then, okay, you're looking at Waverley and you're saying, what about this? Is this one of these entirely machine products? Or was a human involved in the generation of this text? Well, you can say, having run those tests, at least one person was involved in the generation of Waverley. Many machines, but certainly one human. And then you run tests and say, well, was it run by a committee? Was it written by a committee? Was the text generated by a committee? And you say, no, actually, now that we run these tests, the text wasn't generated by a committee. There was at most one person involved in the writing of Waverley. And we also run the stylistic tests on the nationality of the author, and we say, well, anyone who was involved, this is a work of the purest Scotsness. No non-Scots humans were involved in the production of this work. Anyone involved in the writing of Waverley was Scots. Okay? So you do that, you come to that conclusion. Have you at this point referred to anyone? Have you named anyone so far? No, you have not named anyone so far. Have you, in contrast, used a number of how many expressions? Yes, you have used 3. You have used at least one, at most one, and anyone who did this did that. Yep. You use 3 quantified expressions, 3 how many expressions. No names were involved in the generation of these sentences, right? Just how many expressions. Is that plain as day? Okay, well then we're home. For these 3 sentences to be true, there has to be exactly one person who wrote Waverley. But remember, you're thinking very slowly. You might not have realized that. You just walked through doing all these tests, and you got these results. And if you want to state these results concisely, well, you could put it by saying, the author of Waverley. You look up in your book, well, what does the author of Waverley with Scots mean? Well, it means this. It means at least one person wrote Waverley, most one person wrote Waverley, and anyone who wrote Waverley with Scots. So using the is just a way of concisely summing up those 3 sentences. There's been no reference so far, so just introducing an abbreviation doesn't introduce any reference. So when you say the author of Waverley with Scots, you're just briefly expressing those 3 sentences. Now, as it happens, when you figure it out, you might think, well, if that's going to be true, at least one, at most one, and anyone who did this did that, then if that's true, now your thoughts speed up a little bit, and you say, yeah, look at this, there must be exactly one person who wrote Waverley. Now, you didn't notice that so far, but now you notice it, but it's kind of an accident that there's got to be exactly one person who wrote Waverley here. And we say, okay, let's call that person, if such a person exists, the denotation of the author of Waverley. Now then when you say the author of Waverley was Scotch, whether that's true depends on whether the predicate applies to the denotation. So you've got a situation here where you've got a kind of facsimile of reference. It looks like reference, because now that you've so smartly noticed that, that there is such a thing as a denotation of this expression, then you can say whether this whole thing is true depends on whether or not that denotation was Scotch. So that looks like reference, but we already agreed that there isn't really any reference here. The existence of the denotation is, how should I say, just a kind of accident. Because you're so smart, you whip through the three aspects of the analysis very quickly. You spot there's such a thing as a denotation, and you say, that's a reference. But that is a mistake. It's a mistake you make because you think about this so fast. It looks like reference, but it's not, because really what we've got here are just these three sentences. And none of them involve reference. So the realization that there's such a thing as a denotation is in a way accidental to your understanding of the definite description. Whereas if you take something that is using what seems to be a name, like Scott, and you say Scott was indeed Scotch, then you couldn't understand the Scotch there without knowing that it's a referring expression. In understanding that term, there aren't any free clauses to break down. There are no predicates in there. It's a simple term. It contains no moving parts. So with a sign Scott, all there is a reference to the sign. No description here to mediate the reference. So the sign the author of Waverley is equivalent to, as used in the sentence the author of Waverley was Scotch, is equivalent to those three sentences. At least one person wrote Waverley, at most one person wrote Waverley, anyone who wrote Waverley was Scotch. But that doesn't involve denotation, in contrast to this kind of situation. Okay, definite descriptions do not refer. 1 and 2. Reference is, as I'm describing it, is what happens when you have a simple sign whose been given meaning by having an object assigned to it as reference. Denotation is, it sometimes happens that you have a complex of signs here, so that there's a single object on whose characteristics the truth or falsity, although you have a single object such that the truth or falsity of the sentence depends on whether the predicate applies to that object. Yep, that looks like reference. But it's not reference, because that assigning of the object, that object was not assigned to any term there as its semantic value. That object, that's the best way to put it, that object is not the semantic value of any term in this analysis. These terms are quite different kinds of semantic values. They're all either predicates or how many terms. I mean, where is the object? Where is the sign in these three sentences that has an object as its semantic value? There is no sign there that has an object as its semantic value. Yeah? Sorry? Yes, that's completely irrelevant. Yeah, okay. But you see what I mean? So whereas with Scott, whereas it's Scott with Scotch, then the only way you have of saying what the semantic value of Scott here is by saying which object is its semantic value. Yeah? So and when the sign has the object as its semantic value, what that comes to is that when you've got a sentence like that, the truth or falsity of the sentence will depend on whether the predicate applies to that object. Yeah? That denotation is quite like that. Yeah? That's why it's so natural to think these are referring signs. Frege and Searle were not just being random about this. It's very like reference, but it is not reference because there's no sign there that has that object as a semantic value. Yeah. Put it just one last way. You could, when you see that you can define the denotation and say the truth or falsity of the sentence will depend on on how things are with that object, it's natural to think, well, there must be some sign there that has that object as a semantic value. I say I bet it's the description. But it's when you think, well, what are all these complex words? What are all these different words doing in the description? You see, well, the description doesn't have that object as its semantic value as an unstructured block, the way a name does. Yeah? So you've got to break down the description and look at what the semantic values of the components are. And when you do that, the illusion that you have reference here disappears, because you see that none of the signs have that object as a semantic value. Yeah.
So Russell is making the point that when you have definite descriptions, it's just a number of quantified types.
That's right.
But it seems like we have predicates. We could put in a quantifier, but we also could put in a name.
When we have predicates, we could put in a quantifier, but we also could put in a name. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So you make the point they're not, but they're only quantified predicates and not names at all.
In the case of definite descriptions, there are only quantifiers over predicates and not names. I mean, there might be special cases. I mean, in this case, there is a name in there, but as I said earlier, that's accidental. That's not to the point. Putting in the description is just putting in a bunch of quantifiers. Putting in the is just putting in a quantifier. The is a quantifier term. All is a quantifier term. Some is a quantifier term. The is a quantifier term.
So is he just define it as a quantifiable term? Like, I don't know, like, you could put in either a quantifying term or a name in the case of the subject place of the predicate. I think there's something. It has to be just a weird quantifier.
Well, you can put in a name in the sense that you could write in Scott. Yeah? And that's putting a name into the predicate. Yeah? So it's not that you can only, indeed he's saying, it must, as we'll see in a moment, he's saying there must be some cases where you put in a name. Yeah? So it's not that you're only ever allowed to put in quantifiers. It's rather that when you put in a the phrase, you are thereby only putting in a quantifier. And the argument is, these the phrases are complex. I mean, you understand them by understanding the meanings of the individual words that are in the phrase. In order to understand the author of Waverley, you have to understand author of and Waverley. Yeah? And so you need to be able to explain how, from the semantic values of these terms, the semantic value of the whole phrase is being generated. That's what this analysis does. It explains how from the components, wrote Waverley and Scott and was Scotch, you are generating the meaning of the term. So if you really wanted to challenge Russell here, you'd have to say, I think anything is possible, but I think anyone would have to agree that the meaning of a descriptive phrase is complex. How about that? Do we all buy that? It depends on the meanings of the words. There are lots of individual words there, and the meaning of the whole thing depends on the meanings of those words. And you'd have to explain what the semantic value of the whole thing is in terms of the meanings of the components, in such a way that the whole thing was being assumed to be assigned a reference as its semantic value. That's not what happens here. Yeah? So you need to, if you really wanted to challenge Russell, I think that's what you'd have to do. Yeah, Frege didn't really, I mean, Frege founded the subject, so it's not at all that I wish to be disrespectful about Frege's errors, right? Frege did not ask the question, how is the semantic value of a definite description generated from the semantic values of its components? Frege did not really did not seem to focus on the question, how do the semantic values of the words produce the semantic value of the whole thing? He just didn't ask that question. He just seems to have taken it for, this is my reading of it anyway, he just seems to have taken it for granted that when you get the whole description, you get the thing it stands for. And that's what I mean about your mind working too fast. You know, it's true there is such a thing as a denotation, but when you freeze frame over that and say, now how come there is such a thing as a denotation? What are all those little words doing in there? And that's when you see the force of Russell's point. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, well, there's room for choice. I'm distinguishing reference and denotation. I should say incidentally that Kripke, who we'll be looking at next, talks about denotation and reference the whole time, and he's not distinguishing between them. So this is for the purposes of this lecture only, if you see what I mean. It's not that that distinction is used. That's not the way that the terms aren't used in the literature generally with that kind of distinction. Okay, but so that's just an aside. You could do it two ways. You could say, I said there's such a thing as a denotation in the case of a description. A person such that the truth or falsity of the whole thing depends on how things are with that person. You could say in general, if you get that phenomenon, you get denotation, and then that would apply to names too. All I'm doing here is trying to bring out the parallels and contrasts between what a description does and what a name does. How you go on? Suppose there are two Scots and they're both famous. Okay, okay. And are they identical? Yeah. There's still going to be an argument. I mean, this is what I mean by, I began by reminding the argument. I mean, Frege and Searle were not getting their views out of nowhere. There is still going to be an argument about what's going on with conformative identities. Then, how come there can be meaning without reference? And that's, I think, with a really deep, interesting pressure. So bear with me if you think this is a merely technical question. We'll see very shortly that it's not. But these arguments are still there and they still have to be addressed. And they're obviously not addressed by where's it gone? This kind of picture. Because yeah, this is where we began, that this seems inadequate because of the possibility of informative identities and meaning without reference. So now we've been driven back to it because what we had in the middle was descriptions, and now I'm saying it's actually a mistake to try and put descriptions in the middle there. But now that original problem just returns with full force. Yep. Yep. This or that, yeah. I agree it can work like that. I mean, you can point to something and use your finger to point to it. And I can point to someone and say, oh, that tall man. And he's not actually tall. But it doesn't matter. I did the whole flourish, including the words, in such a way that you got locked onto the right thing. Yeah. And the words there were just gas to help you look at the right thing. You see what I mean? So there, this kind of analysis doesn't really seem appropriate at all. Because if I'm saying the tall man is talking, that tall man is talking, then I'm just using the words as a way of getting you to look at the right person. And it's as if I pull you in front of the person and waddle the person at you while forcing your head to look at him, if you see what I mean. But in polite society, we don't do it just like that. You know, once you're over about 2 years old, we don't do it like that anymore. So I just do some talking to get you to lock onto the right thing. But the content of the talking isn't important. Right? That can happen. I agree that can happen. And you say, well, it doesn't matter that he's tall. I mean him. Yeah. But what we're talking about here is when you take the terms literally, you take them as saying exactly what they, how should I say, canonically mean. Yeah. Because as far as that kind of thing goes, any word might do. You know, if I could actually say, and that would work to get you to look at the right person. Okay, last one, we should move on. Yeah. That's right. It doesn't have semantic value in and of itself, yeah.
Then how do you come back to, like, if I just say the author's writing it by itself, not in the context of the whole sentence, but I can still understand if it's still like present. It's not like I need to say the whole sentence in order for it to actually like refer or note.
Well, you can know what the denotation would be if the thing were put into a whole sentence. Yeah. But there's a very general point here that there's no such thing really as understanding words outside the context of a sentence. Yeah. I mean, if I just say, well, look, I mean, suppose I say, look, listen up, class, this laptop, this pup, and this remote. Oh, what happened? Nothing, right? I mean, I just gave you a list of words. Yeah. I said, in order to make a move in language, in order to do something that makes some sense, you've got to utter a whole sentence. So all these notions of reference or denotation have to keep being tied back to the truth or falsity of sentences. I mean, if I just say to you right now, the King of France, well, what of it, right? I mean, what do you want to say about him? That's the question. Yeah. I haven't actually said anything yet. So there's some sense in which you can know the denotation, but that's just, well, let me fill it out. I would know what the denotation was. I said the last one, but there was another. Okay. I really think we should move on, if that's okay. Because we're not going to go very far from this point for a while. Okay, so, I mean,